oh my God, things are not good. You're the golden return, got the strength to carry on, Hello, beautiful soul family. Britt Cannon here, host of the Walk On podcast, the podcast where I try to demystify spirituality, personal growth and healing, and whatever else I feel like talking about. This week's horn honking. This week's episode is called The Insatiable Ego of War. Like everyone else, I have been kind of glued to refreshing my newsfeed, getting updates to the conflict that's going on in Ukraine at the hands of Russia, and it's just sort of on my mind. And I've been thinking a lot about war and like conflicts, and coming from a military town, I grew up in Norfolk, Virginia. Everybody's like family is in the military, or we have multiple generational military families, and so I have very real experience with living with people who have PTSD from having served in combat scenarios, and really they haven't brought real people, even the winners of the conflict, haven't brought them anything but generational pain and suffering, mental illness, struggle with addictions, not even to speak on the fact that, you know, countries send people to fight in wars, and then if they come back with mental health struggles, they basically leave them out hanging out to dry, you know, just kind of like there's this macho patriarchal mentality of like, if you can't handle it, if war broke you, then you must be too weak, then you must not be able to, you know, hold your own out there. And I just think that so much of this, when you break it down, you know, these world leaders are essentially playing like Risk or chess with real lives, with real people, with real families, with real, you know, tangible circumstances, where to them it's just numbers on a page. It's just victories and losses. It's just, you know, we spend so much of our military budget. It's just coordinated drone strikes. It's not living with the actual real life consequences. And who suffers from war? People. Real people. People without power. People without any kind of systemic pull. And who calls the shots as far as these conflicts are concerned? The people in power. And that's just, you know, as someone who dabbles in anarchism, once I start thinking about how like money is an illusion, like money is a collective delusion that we all agree to believe in, that we all agree to allow it to run our lives, to determine our behavior, to, the horn agrees, to have it dictate how we spend our precious, precious, precious time on this planet, and how borders, you know, countries' borders are just remnants of colonialism and imperialism, which was basically just a bunch of white guys deciding that God or government entitles them to ownership of places that were already settled, that already had people on them. And then we fight over this for centuries, just a line in the sand, essentially, and an invisible marker of this is your space, this is my space, and now we're going to duke it out to make sure that we stay in our own spaces, or that I get a piece of your space because I've decided you're not worth having a space that big. Or it's just, I don't want you to determine your own way of being, you know, I want there to be capitalism everywhere and you're doing a communism and that makes me upset. It's just like so much of what we teach children, you know, like we have to share, we have to consider each other's spaces, we have to respect each other's consent. You know, if you want to hug your friend and they say no, you have to listen. Like, so much of the beauty of teaching children, of the lessons that we impart in them and the ways we encourage them to be good, loving, gentle, dysfunctional people, we just grow up and ignore. And suddenly it's all about grabbing everything you can take and fuck the consequences. And like, if someone loses out to you in your quest for more, then that's their fault. And just the selfishness and the pride and the just rampant egoism is too much for me sometimes. And I understand, I said this in the podcast episode, I'm not under any delusions of grandeur that I understand the complexities of diplomacy or global conflict, but what I do understand is human nature, and what I do understand is an abuser when I see them. I know the patterns, I know the mentality, I know the entitlement, and that's all it is. That's all we're seeing here. When I say war is bad, I don't mean that people don't have a right to defend themselves. Obviously, people have a right to defend themselves, but sometimes that right looks very, in an American example, very Toby Keith, very like, we'll put a boot up your ass if you threaten our freedom. Very disproportionate reactions, Pearl Harbor gets bombed, we nuke a couple places, devastating them indefinitely. Or a 9/11 happens and we totally basically level two countries which were invaded under false pretenses. It's just like the justifications never truly match the actions. With Ukraine defending itself, obviously, like, that's great. I love reading the story of the woman with the sunflower seeds in her pocket telling the Russian soldier, like, this is where the flowers are gonna bloom when you die here or whatever. It's like, yeah, rock on. But this wouldn't have even happened in the first place. They wouldn't even be needing to risk their lives, needing to risk imprisonment or capture, needing to see even more death and destruction and devastation than we've already seen in the past 2 years thanks to COVID. And then we will see in the future as climate change descends on us in even more devastating ways. It's just like, it's one dude's ego. It's wanting more resources. Sometimes it's in the form of oil. It used to be in the form of spices, or in the form of people that you're buying and trading like property. It never comes from a good place. It never comes from a just place. And what happened to just like murder is bad? War is bad. I know this is like, can seem very simplistic, but it's just like, I understand that anarchism is a little bit living in sort of a projection of a fantasy, or like a utopian ideal. Like, I understand, truly I do, before you yell at me, I do understand how far we are from my perfect world. I'm not operating under any kind of misunderstanding of how bad things are and how far we are from the way from the way I think that things should go and life should be. But that being said, I think not acknowledging how good things can be and how far we are away from that does nothing. So if this one dude wasn't kicking in doors, dropping bombs on folks just because of his ego, just because he wants to prove how big his dick is, then people wouldn't need to be defending themselves. It's just like if our countries had taken care of us, truly taken care of us during COVID, if we had been given enough resources to stay home, if felt really safe and cared for, if we hadn't been just like left to fend for ourselves and good fucking luck, then things right now would look very different than they currently do. People would feel a lot better. There would be a lot more camaraderie and community. But we are very, very far away from that being a possibility. And why is that? Well, I think the biggest reason why. It could be, this is the answer to all of our issues right now, from climate change to late stage capitalism to COVID to conflicts like the one in Ukraine or Israel and Palestine or Syria, or, also, can I just interject for a second and talk about the inherent white supremacy in the ways that people only feel empathy for white people living in conflict places? What is going on? We just don't care. We just don't hear about Black and brown countries. You're not allowed to say, if you're in even progressive circles, not leftist circles, but progressive Democrat circles, you're not even allowed to be free Palestine, and so we only feel empathy for other white people. White people only feel empathy for other white people. That's a problem. That's a big problem in 2022. And it's just that reporter that was I'm seeing people with blonde hair and blue eyes blown up. It's why is that even coming out of your mouth? Why are you even talking about that right now? Oh my God. Things are not good. So if you find yourself having more empathy for this particular, that's my dog, this particular issue, it's okay, Jakey, than the ones that have been going on for forever, specifically the ones, if you're in the US, that are, the blood is on our hands, maybe ask yourself why. Maybe unpack that a little bit, because maybe something more sinister is going on than you want to admit. Just ask yourself why you have more naturally occurring empathy for one than the other. Or ask yourself why that doesn't get as much media coverage. Why this one is so on blast to the point where there's a Ukrainian choir on SNL, but that doesn't happen for the other ongoing wars and conflicts that have been taking place for decades. I digress a little tiny bit. So, ego. The ego doesn't want to die. The ego, when the ego changes, when the ego learns, when we have a realization, we experience a little death. And the ego doesn't want to do that. So it digs in its heels and it says, no, I'm not changing. And that's what we're experiencing over and over and over again. I talked about this in my Accepting Where We Are video of my first one of the new year, if you want to go check that out. Basically, life is a river. And we are meant to flow downstream. You may flow parallel with someone else for a while and then break apart. You may do a thing for a while, be on one sort of current or whatever, and then it changes and you're doing something else. But really what we're supposed to get better at with life is flowing. We're supposed to let go and just go with the natural progression of things. This is so we can practice for the ultimate transformation, for the ultimate change, which is death, so that we can do so lovingly, with gratitude, with peace, and without all this resistance that so many of us carry now. That's why meditation is good. That's why orgasms are good, because they're these little snippets. That's why sleep is so good, because it's these little Costco food samples of the big D. So when we resist, it's, you're flowing down river and then you're like, no, I don't want to go down river. I don't know what's down there. What if it's a crocodile? What if it's a great white shark? So I'm going to pull onto this branch. I'm going to hold onto this rock. I'm going to swim in the other direction. But inevitably, you always get tired of fighting, When you fight life, life has a way of fighting back. When you flow with life, life has a way of carrying you, of guiding you, of protecting you. And we're all supposed to learn how to do that in our own individual lives. A macrocosm of that is political evolution. Things have moved more progressively. Queer people exist. We are humans. We come in peace, we would like to have the same rights as any other people in relationships. We would like to have children. We would like to just exist safely. You know, trans people exist. It's a thing. It's always been a thing. We've come out of the closet, like it's happening. And instead of people, specifically people in power, being like, cool, got it. I was misinformed before. Now I have new information. Thank you very much. I will adjust my way of being. They're like, no, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to see it. You're wrong. And I'm going to do everything in my power to dial the clock back legislatively because I want to continue oppressing people. I want to continue having power. I want to continue feeling special for being straight and cis and white and Christian and rich. And I can't do that if there's all these people with their different pronouns and their abortions and their critical race theory, and it just like challenges my worldview too much, and my ego says no. And because I have historically had the loudest voice in the room, I'm going to use all of that volume and privilege to radicalize other people who feel similarly to me, and we're going to do something about it, and we're going to like literally like irrevocably harm people. And that is all it is. It's just a resistance to change. It's just a resistance to progress. It's just a resistance to the death of the ego. And I understand on one level a fear of the unknown. Like I said, you look down that river and you're like, well, I know what's that way. I know what's against the current because I just came from there. And that feels a lot safer than that way, which could be a waterfall or any number of things. And so my fear of that makes me want to swim in this direction, even though logically, how far could I really get? I'm literally going against the current. Despite what billionaires want, they're not going to live forever, right? Despite what corporations want, this planet isn't going to last forever. It's going to kick us the fuck off if we don't do something about this. COVID is not going away just because you lift the mask mandates and the vaccine mandates. Like, it's not going to just be like, oh, got it, you're over this? Okay, I'll see myself out. It's fine. No, it's not going to happen. You're delusional. You're like operating in a, why is it always conservatives that are like facts, not feelings? But they are the most feelings operating people. We need to learn how to surrender. We need to learn how to engage with other people's humanity in a way that combats the objectification that happens when we make someone an other. You can't harm someone when you're tuned into the fact that you are the same. Like, not just the same as in we're both humans or we're both alive or we're both like breathing beings, but we're the same in the sense that consciousness is all one. And that if you believe in the whole matrix reality thing, which I do, matter is just denser or less dense vibrations, and that like me moving my hand through the air, really there's no separation between me and the air if you break it down on an atomic level. If I touch something, then there's no difference really between me and the thing I'm touching, and we're just all atoms moving around. And if you think about that, it's like, well, then we are all riding some wave together. We're all made of the same material, literally stardust, that the universe is made of. And if I tune into that, if I meet another person, if I encounter a challenging person throughout my day, if I can make myself stop, if they're annoying me, stop and say, you know what? We're existing the same time and space. You are alive. I am alive. We are made of the same material. And maybe my annoyance at you is showing me something about me. And maybe I could just take a deep breath and keep it moving. Or show compassion. Or, just not rage out and feel annoyed that someone's walking on the same side of the street as me, which does sometimes happen when I'm having a rough day. But if I can like tune into that compassion and that patience, and also just the knowledge that no one is any more entitled to anything than anyone else. No one is any more entitled to power. No one is divinely ordained to rule. And that really, from a communist perspective, the power is in the people. None of them, could they fight a war without people in the armed forces fighting it for them? No, it would just be a bunch of old white dudes hitting each other with sticks. It would take 35 seconds and we'd be rid of them all. We have the power. We have the strength in numbers. We have the strength in labor. And we can tell them no. I mean, if there's anything to be taken away from Ukraine's response to Russia's invasion, it's that people do have power. There is strength in conviction, and there is something really touching about consent. Like, there's something very healing about consent. There's something very inspiring about someone saying, no, I'm not just gonna like let you take this. This is mine. I don't want you here. And I think we could all learn something from that. I think we could all be empowered by that. And, you know, if we don't find a way to transcend the egos of the people in power and direct things in a different direction, for lack of a better word at the moment, we're going to be in real big trouble. And I also think that, like, are we really doing this right now? We haven't even figured out COVID yet, and we're doing invasions. Like, just like, get it together, people. Like, get a therapist, write in your journal, consult a healer, like, get your aura cleansed. What the fuck is wrong with you? And the answer is they have a massive ego and very little empathy. And yeah. And it's a real bummer that they have so much power and so much say in what happens to the rest of us. And I really don't have anything more positive to say about it than that. But I hope this makes sense. I hope this is just like just my interpretation of my observations about ego. You know, I heard this quote, I can't remember who it's from, but it's that, you know, everyone always says power corrupts, but the truth of it is power doesn't corrupt, it reveals. It empowers people to do what they already wanted to do anyway. And I think that's important to keep in mind. So I think it's really just important for everyday life, for the enjoyment of life, for the intimacy and authenticity in the connections we make, in the art we create, in the content we create, in the communities we build, and in our future survival, that we work on ourselves as much as we can. We become as loving as possible. We become as compassionate as possible. And we tune into that reality that we're all in this together, because we are. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I'll be back with another video next week. Thank you. Happy healing. Bye. Oh, check the description box also. All the stuff is down there. Okay, love you. Bye.